In August 2019, a series of headlines flickered across global news feeds at most dismissed as a surreal geopolitical meme. The United States was interested in purchasing Greenland. To the casual observer, it sounded like an archaic 19th century land grab or a distracted diplomatic whim. However, beneath the layer of social media mockery lies a cold, structural reality that the Pentagon and the White House have understood for over a century. Greenland is not just a massive, ice-covered island. It is the most valuable piece of unexploited real estate on the planet, serving as the unsinkable aircraft carrier of the North. As the ice sheets retreat, they are revealing a trillion-dollar treasure chest of minerals and opening the first new global trade routes since the Panama Canal. This is not a joke. It is the opening move in a multi-generational chess game for Arctic hegemony. The logic of the United States seeking to acquire Greenland is rooted in the inescapable physics of geography. In an era where the Arctic is rapidly becoming a navigable ocean, the nation that controls Greenland controls the gateway between the Atlantic and the Pacific. We are witnessing the birth of a polar Silk Road, a shipping lane that cuts transit times between Asia and Europe by 40%, bypassing the congested and vulnerable Suez Canal. For Washington, the prospect of this route being dominated by a Russo-Chinese alliance is a systemic threat to the current global order. If you want to understand why a superpower would offer billions for a land with only 56,000 inhabitants, you have to look past the ice and into the deep-sea trenches and the mineral-rich crust beneath. Before we deconstruct the terrifying military and economic mechanisms behind this move, I need to ask you to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. At Beneath the Numbers, we don't just report the news. We map the invisible structural forces that dictate why nations act the way they do. By joining our community, you support investigative deep dives into the systems that run our world. Stay with us until the very end of this video, because we will be revealing the classified details of Project Iceworm, a secret nuclear city buried under the Greenland ice that explains exactly why the U.S. military views this island as their most critical northern asset. This revelation changes the entire context of the modern purchase offer. To understand the 2019 proposal, we must first accept that American interest in Greenland is a historical constant, not an anomaly. Since the purchase of Alaska in 1867, which was famously mocked as Seward's folly before the discovery of gold and oil, the United States has viewed the Arctic as its natural defensive perimeter. The framework of U.S. grand strategy dictates that no foreign power should be allowed to establish a military presence within striking distance of the North American mainland. Greenland, situated a mere 1,200 miles from the North Pole, is the ultimate buffer zone. It is the geographic equivalent of high ground in a medieval siege. The structural framework of this acquisition is built on three pillars: the GIUK Gap, rare Earth dominance, and the transpolar sea route. These are not independent factors. They are a feedback loop of geopolitical necessity. As climate change increases the liquidity of the Arctic, the value of Greenlandic soil appreciates at an exponential rate. From an engineering standpoint, Greenland is the only site capable of hosting the massive radar arrays and interceptor missiles required to neutralize a transpolar nuclear strike. The island is the central node in a system designed for the survival of the American state. When we analyze the numbers, the trillions in minerals and the billions in defense spending, the purchase of the island starts to look less like a real estate deal and more like a mandatory insurance policy for the 21st century. To grasp the inevitability of the current situation, we must look back to 1946, a year when the world was being carved into new spheres of influence. President Harry Truman did not just consider buying Greenland. He made a formal, secret offer to the Kingdom of Denmark for $100 million in gold bars. From a structural engineering perspective, The U.S. military had just spent the previous 5 years building infrastructure on the island during World War II to protect Atlantic supply lines from Nazi U-boats. They realized that the over-the-pole route was the shortest path for the newly formed Soviet Union to strike the American heartland. Greenland was no longer a distant colony. It was the front line of the Cold War. Truman's offer was based on a cold calculation of defense economics. At the time, $100 million was a staggering sum, equivalent to nearly $1.5 billion today, but the cost of not owning the island was deemed higher. The logic was that de facto control through treaties was brittle, subject to the whims of Danish domestic politics or potential Soviet intimidation. Washington wanted de jure sovereignty. Although Denmark declined the offer, citing national pride and the indivisibility of their kingdom, the negotiation resulted in the 1951 Defense Treaty. This agreement effectively turned Greenland into a massive, permanent U.S. military base while allowing Denmark to keep the flag flying. It was a compromise that lasted for 70 years, but as the ice begins to melt, the cracks in that compromise are becoming visible, forcing the U.S. to reconsider the purchase as the only way to ensure total operational freedom. The primary reason Greenland is a non-negotiable asset for the United States lies in a naval choke point known as the GIUK Gap, standing for Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom. In the field of maritime strategy, this is a kill zone. It is the only way for the Russian Northern Fleet, based in Murmansk, to access the open Atlantic Ocean. If Russian submarines can slip through this gap undetected, they can threaten the underwater fiber optic cables that carry 97% of transatlantic data and the shipping lanes that feed Europe. Greenland is the western anchor of this defensive line. Without total control over Greenland's territorial waters, the U.S. is effectively blind to what is moving beneath the waves. The operational reality of the GIUK Gap involves a sophisticated network of sensors known as SOSUS, the Sound Surveillance System. These are massive arrays of hydrophones anchored directly into the continental shelf of Greenland. They act as a digital tripwire capable of identifying the unique acoustic signature of every Russian Yazan-class submarine. However, as Russia modernizes its fleet with silent propulsion and hypersonic Zircon missiles, the distance required to intercept these threats is shrinking. The U.S. needs to upgrade its infrastructure on Greenland's eastern coast, not just the existing Thule base in the west, to maintain the integrity of the gap. This requirement for new, permanent, and sovereign infrastructure is what drives the systemic urge to buy the island outright, removing the diplomatic friction of dealing with a middleman like Copenhagen. The second pillar of the American imperative to acquire Greenland is found in the periodic table. As the Greenland ice sheet recedes at a rate of nearly 280 billion tons of ice per year, it is exposing a geological anomaly. The world's largest untapped deposits of rare earth elements, RE. These minerals, such as neodymium, praseodymium, and dysprosium, are the oil of the 21st century. They are essential for the production of everything from F-35 fighter jet engines and Virginia-class submarine sonar to the permanent magnets in electric vehicle motors and wind turbines. Currently, China controls over 85% of the world's processing capacity for these elements. For the United States, Greenland represents the only structural solution to break this near monopoly and secure its high-tech military and industrial supply chains for the next 200 years. The scale of this wealth is staggering. The Kvanefjeld project in southern Greenland alone is estimated to contain one of the most significant radioactive and rare earth deposits on Earth. Geologists estimate that the island holds over $1.1 trillion in diversified mineral wealth, including vast reserves of zinc, lead, gold, and iron ore. But it is the REs that turn this into a matter of national security. In a scenario of systemic decoupling from China, the U.S. cannot maintain its technological edge if its weapon systems depend on Chinese refined minerals. Acquisition of Greenland would allow the U.S. to apply federal land management and environmental standards to accelerate extraction, bypassing the bureaucratic delays and local political volatility that currently plague Greenlandic mining initiatives. The 2019 purchase offer was not triggered by a sudden interest in rocks, but by a specific move from Beijing. In 2018, China declared itself a near-Arctic state, despite its borders being thousands of miles away from the North Pole. Soon after, Chinese state-owned enterprises began bidding for the construction of 3 major international airports in Greenland. From an infrastructure perspective, this was a Trojan horse. If a Chinese firm owned and operated the primary logistics hubs in Greenland, they could effectively control the flow of people and cargo to the island, potentially establishing a dual-use facility that could host military aircraft under the guise of commercial aviation. This was a direct challenge to the Monroe Doctrine in the 21st century. The United States responded with immediate structural pressure, forcing the Danish government to provide the financing for the airports instead, effectively blocking the Chinese bid. However, the threat remains. China's Polar Silk Road initiative seeks to integrate Arctic shipping routes into its Belt and Road Initiative, creating a permanent economic presence in the North Atlantic. For Washington, the logic is binary. Either the United States owns Greenland, or it spends the next century in a constant, resource-draining diplomatic knife fight to keep China out. The purchase is the only way to hard-code the Arctic into the American sphere of influence, ensuring that the new shipping routes of the North are governed by Western maritime law rather than Chinese economic coercion. In the late 1950s, the United States military embarked on one of the most ambitious and terrifying engineering projects in history, Project Iceworm. The objective was to build a network of mobile nuclear missile launch sites hidden entirely within the Greenlandic ice sheet. This was not a mere theoretical exercise. The Army constructed Camp Century, a sprawling subglacial city powered by a portable nuclear reactor. The blueprint involved 4,000 kilometers of tunnels housing 600 Iceman missiles, all capable of striking the Soviet Union within minutes. This project demonstrates that the U.S. has never viewed Greenland as just an ally's territory, but as a sovereign-level laboratory for strategic dominance. The structural failure of Project Iceworm was not due to politics, but to the unpredictability of the ice itself. Engineers discovered that the glaciers were moving much faster than anticipated, crushing the tunnels and the nuclear infrastructure within them. Although the project was officially abandoned in 1966, the radioactive waste and the skeleton of the base remain buried under the snow. As the ice melts today, this toxic legacy is resurfacing, creating a legal and environmental headache for Denmark. For the United States, this history serves as a lesson. To truly utilize Greenland's potential, they cannot simply build on the ice. They need to control the land beneath it. The 2019 offer was, in many ways, an attempt to resolve the unfinished business of Camp Century by securing the legal right to build permanent, stable, and sovereign military infrastructure on the bedrock. In the lexicon of the Pentagon, Greenland is frequently referred to as an unsinkable aircraft carrier. This is not hyperbole. It is a description of the island's role as a fixed, massive platform for power projection. Unlike a traditional aircraft carrier, Greenland cannot be sunk by a torpedo, and its sheer size makes it impossible to disable with a single strike. From Thule Air Base, now renamed Pituffik Space Base, the United States operates its most critical early warning radar system. This facility is the backbone of the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, tracking satellites and potential intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, coming over the North Pole. The infrastructure of Pituffik is a marvel of extreme environment engineering. It features a 10,000-foot runway and massive solid-state phased array radars that could detect objects the size of a football from thousands of miles away. However, the limitation of the current arrangement is that the U.S. is technically a tenant on Danish land. As the Arctic Ocean becomes a theater for naval and aerial skirmishes, the U.S. needs to expand this carrier to include deep water ports for its new fleet of icebreakers and docking facilities for nuclear submarines. Buying the island would turn the entire landmass into a unified military district, allowing for the deployment of THAAD missile defense systems and advanced electronic warfare nodes without the need for constant diplomatic renegotiation with a foreign parliament in Copenhagen. When we synthesize the variables of naval geography, mineral scarcity, and a shifting climate, the purchase of Greenland stops being a headline and starts being a mathematical inevitability for a global superpower. We are entering an era of systemic decoupling, where the United States must secure every link in its industrial and military chain. The Arctic is no longer a frozen wasteland. It is a $30 trillion frontier. If the United States does not formalize its control over Greenland, it leaves a structural vacuum that will be filled by the near-Arctic ambitions of China and the aggressive territorial claims of Russia. The logic of the system dictates that a superpower cannot allow its most critical defensive flank to be governed by a small, distant European nation that lacks the military capacity to defend it against 21st century threats. The price tag of $1.1 trillion for the island, while seemingly enormous, is actually a bargain when measured against the cost of a lost century. If Washington were to pay this amount, it would represent less than 5% of the U.S. national debt, yet it would return a dividend of energy independence, rare earth dominance, and the total closure of the Atlantic to hostile submarine fleets. The mechanism at play here is strategic rent. Currently, the U.S. pays for Greenland through diplomatic favors and the protection of Denmark. By purchasing the island, they convert that ongoing rent into permanent ownership, eliminating the risk of a future Greenlandic government choosing a better deal from Beijing. This is about the permanent removal of geopolitical risk from the American balance sheet. The story of the United States and Greenland is far from over. From the secret gold offers of Harry Truman to the modern race for rare earth minerals, the pattern is clear. America's northern expansion is a project in motion, not a relic of the past. As the ice continues to thin, the strategic value of this landmass will only rise. Whether through an outright purchase, a long-term lease, or a new form of associated statehood, the structural gravitational pull of the United States will eventually bring Greenland fully into its orbit. The memes and the laughter of 2019 have faded, replaced by the cold, hard reality of military bases, deep-sea mining, and the quiet shadow of nuclear deterrence. Greenland is the final piece of the North American puzzle. It is the Sentinel that guards the Atlantic, the mine that will power the Green Revolution, and the platform from which the next Cold War will be managed, or won. We are not just watching a real estate deal. We are watching the world's leading superpower fortify its house for a turbulent century. If you found this deep dive into the hidden systems of the Arctic valuable, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button. Your support allows us to continue peeling back the layers of global power. What do you think? Will the U.S. eventually succeed in buying Greenland? Or is the era of land acquisitions over? Let us know in the comments. See you in the next video.